Hi, and welcome back to the Entangled Health Podcast. My name is Madison Murphy Barney, and I am the founder and principal of the Center for Story and Strategy. And I'm delighted to have you here today. And today I'm going to talk about how to add storytelling as a strategy into existing operations. We all know how, like, daunting it is and how unlikely things are to change if we are like, okay, we need to build a whole new programmatic arm or hire five more people to do this. But my goal is really to show you how you can use your existing staff and even increase the efficiency of your teams by adding storytelling into existing operations. It is not only possible, it is like really the only way to do it well. Um, and first, I wanted to kick us off with a little bit of public health spotlight. So maybe you've heard the Boston Medical Center started a medical legal partnership that supported folks whose utilities had been shut off and started a utility shutoff protection program. So what they did is they added like into their existing services, into their existing touch points with patients. They added legal services and specifically attorneys who could help with utility shutoff protection for patients. And what started as like a really simple effort to help individual patients get their heat and electricity turned back on turned into a really systemic policy that now protects thousands of folks from that happening. And if you've ever lived in Boston, I lived there for 2 years for grad school, you know that like, a Boston winter, a Boston any season, like nobody's utilities should be shut off, but like particularly in those colder months or those really, they have then really hot summers, like it's extremely, extremely important that folks have access to a warm place or a cooled down place. So, and no heat or electricity means, more asthma attacks and pain from sickle cell and the inability to refrigerate medication for thousands of people. And like, as we know, many medications become fully ineffective when we don't, when they don't have refrigeration and the New England winter utility bills are high. So what they did is they developed this screening protocols to identify patients at risk for utility shutoff. And then attorneys trained the doctors to write protection letters that included the correct information to demonstrate the medical need. And during the first year of this project, physicians wrote letters protecting 193 people from having their utilities shut off. And when the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities announced a hearing to revise its utility shutoff regulations, attorneys and healthcare team members submitted joint testimony that resulted in regulation changes. And these changes reduced the need for chronic disease recertification from 12 times a year to twice a year, and also allowed nurses and nurse practitioners to write and submit letters on behalf of patients. So, as a result of this program and of the regulation changes that it brought about, more than 10,000 people with asthma and 400 people with sickle cell disease that are seen annually at Boston Medical Center are at a significantly reduced risk of health complications that arise from having their lights, heat, and air conditioning shut off during the year, while also reducing the burden on the healthcare clinic for like those who can write the letters, not knowing how to write the letters, not knowing how to protect, and then also seeing more patients who wouldn't need to be seen if they hadn't lost access to their utilities. And so it's just a great example, I think, of how adding something into our existing infrastructure is always the most worthwhile and useful and effective way to do things rather than trying to like, we all know like when we like if we have our operating systems here and then we build something aside here and try to integrate it in, that's so much more challenging than just like being within our existing operations. And so there are so many ways that this just like avoids overwhelm, increases impact, and meets your organization where it already is. And there's a couple um reasons why. One is that, our staff who are devoted to their work are, when they're tasked with a new initiative, it often feels and becomes extra work and becomes this sort of like, great, great, this sounds good, but you've lost the pulse of like what we actually have capacity for. And so, when we add them into existing things, it's like, how can we make this as seamless possible? How can we make storytelling a part of patient interactions, and beyond? And so there's just so many ways to do that. Three main ways I want to do that is one, to leverage what already exists. So, odds are you write annual reports or grant narratives or staff surveys. And it's really, these are really beautiful opportunities to one, do intentional story gathering around these milestones because you have people's attention, and then also to add stories in, especially when things are going to be external facing, like annual reports and grant narratives. They make such a different impact and are so much more likely to be read and, really make donors and funders feel like, oh, okay, like there's our impact when they can hear and feel and see the stories. And so you already likely have teams who are responsible for these reports. And it's like, I've talked about this before, but this sort of like circle that feeds itself of like the listen, design, and move of the, like, when you have annual reports and things that have stories in them and you're around the annual report, then you use that, you tie in a story gathering element so that those stories then feed the grant narratives, and grant narratives, become more funding, and funding then becomes greater annual reports with greater stories. And so, like, when you have both story gathering and story sharing as a part of these processes, they just continually get better and more easeful. And then, like, we all deeply, deeply know the frustration of writing an annual report that might never be read, or, um, might just be skimmed over. But when we have story in it and we engage people in it, it's like, okay, they're looking forward to this, which means they're paying attention to our impact, which means the stories of our impact can be even greater, and on and on. And the organization continues to get more funding, and the impact increases, and you're bringing the community along with you. So you have the testimonials of impact, and then you're building trust with the communities through doing that. So it's a beautiful process. And it goes from like, it takes us from a place where annual reports are sort of this like heads down, a couple people are doing annual reports in immense and intense focus, over to like a place where it becomes this, and like grant narratives too. Like, we all know the feeling of being like really deeply in a grant narrative, and feeling just sort of like lost and alone in like the word count and all of it. And it's like, when we add story to it, it becomes this like collective process, and something that we have community tie into, and all of that. Um, and so, yeah, there's just so many ways to layer in stories. If you're curious more about how to do that, I would love to support your organization in doing that. Feel free to reach out, because that's what, I've just seen so many organizations just do this really well and just have such a big um, way. It's such a way to stand out. And like, um, I've just watched grant funders and foundations and things really respond to this type of, because it really comes off to them as initiative and as like innovation. And that's what they're always looking for, is like, how did things happen differently with our money, with our funds, things like that. And so, yeah, I just think I've seen it just really open new doors as well, of like, oh, I saw that annual report and it was different, because like we live in a time where so much looks the same, and that like everything has been canvaed to death, and um like corporate lingoed to death, where it's like, if you can actually stand out, then like you're going to, like, people are going to send your annual report around, and like new doors are going to open. So it just like, it really benefits in every way. And then there are definitely micro practices that you can do as well. Like, um, say your organization hosts like a group of some type, turning one of those into a story gathering session or a storytelling training, where you train folks on, and training is interesting because like storytelling is so much just the air we breathe, and something we do every day at the dinner table when we're scrolling, we're watching storytelling, things like that. And so, um, it's just a but like training people to one, like feel like how to ask great questions, how to have great interviews, how to elicit great stories without, like, with an ethical framework and without pulling them, just finding ways that that, your organization is already engaging with the community that you're responsible for serving, and then adding stories into those. One other micro practice that is really incredible and that is one of my specialties is working with organizations who have are like client or patient facing, so hospitals or nonprofits that, have like caseloads and caseworkers and things like that. And working with hospitals and caseworkers on ways to add, like, collect and add in brief stories and from the patients to like get in their charts and in their paperwork so that practitioners, doctors, nurses, and or like social workers or other case managers can feel like they hear a bit of what what an a patient, usually it's like we choose like three questions and a patient can choose one to answer. And then we put it in their chart and in their paperwork so that patients and providers have that moment where the patient knows that the provider has heard or read this thing about them that really brings to life like who they are beyond what's on their paperwork and their charts. And practitioners in the times that we've done this have mentioned feeling so much more connected to their patients because that's why they are, most of them, that's why they're in medicine. They got into medicine because they care deeply about people and they want to serve them. And so allowing for that and just that small practice has like really changed patient provider satisfaction in the cases I've worked on it for. And if that's something you're interested in, certainly reach out. And then those stories can be added into like grand rounds and you can edit them down and have them be, played at different meetings as just like a warm up and a part of reminding folks why you all are in the work that you're in. And it's because of stories like that. And board meetings are a great place to play these stories. And anywhere where it's like we want people to know our impact and understand our impact, playing a story at the beginning of a meeting is just such a good way to ground people into why they are in the work they're in. So often it's like, we have people around a table who maybe have they come to the work for different from different angles and they do different things and serve different purposes, but when you can have a story that like grounds a meeting or a gathering, puts you all on the same page of like why you're doing this together. I remember this is a practice I used when I was working in North Dakota, which is where I'm from, on an anti-human trafficking initiative. And we brought together a statewide coalition, but the coalition had like vastly different roles. Like we had the attorneys general and legal and religious communities and nonprofits and law enforcement and everyone was there and everyone came to the work from a very different place. And we'd often play stories at the beginning of meetings of the impact of our work and from the communities who were responsible for serving to remind us of like, this is who we're responsible to. This is why we're all doing this work together. And with this common core grounding, like the conflicts that come from having different backgrounds and different angles on the work can really be overcome and seen. Um, and Um, I think also, it's like those small practices that can just be built in. I'm sure we've all heard of like micro habits and habit stacking and things. And you can think of great storytelling, of course, when designed intentionally and carefully, as like a habit stacking exercise, for your organization of like, where can we slide it in? Follow me here on this metaphor, but like I'm also a doula, and often, as folks are getting closer to giving birth, they'll start eating dates, and people don't like to eat so many dates in a day. And so it's like, well, where can we slip the dates in? Is there a smoothie that you eat? Is there a way we can drop them up in your oatmeal? Is there a way we can make them into bars? So I almost think of it as that as like, how do we slide in storytelling so it becomes a part of organizational structure? So then when you go to like write the grant report or the annual report or suddenly like a last minute opportunity comes up to make a great pitch about your organization to a funder or to a new board member, you have these stories on hand and they've been collected with like dignity and value and and ethics. And so, like, when you know that, you can just, you have this bank available that you can use at any time to just show the impact of your work. And I also think that just having a like frequent structure for sustainability is really important. So it's like maybe you do a yearly check-in or a quarterly check-in with the folks who are, in your organization who are working on storytelling initiatives. And one offering I have is I call it a story lab session. And it's where we bring together decision makers and the people who are on the ground doing the storytelling, and we sort of take an assessment of what's going on um, within the organization, where are opportunities, what is our vision for storytelling, and just get all of that um, in one session, and then create a document that like outlines a strategy based on those stories and what I heard. And so, this is something that you can find your own way to do, or of course, reach out if this is something an exercise you want to do together. But it's having something on the calendar for a monthly, quarterly, or yearly engagement is really helpful and important to just like check in and make sure that your story bank and your all of your stories are like up to um, organized in a way that feels good and edited in a way that feels good and shareable, and all of that. And that can just be done so sort of seamlessly with just like, 1 to 4 meetings a year. And so, yeah, the main things there again are leveraging what already exists, looking at the places where you already have output and where it'd be helpful to have stories. Again, those annual reports, grant narratives, staff surveys, and layering them in. And then the next is finding micro practices in your organization. There's so many ways to do this, and so much of it depends on your organizational culture and can just be really helpful. To just build in and do that type of habit stacking. And then also creating that really low lift, but like exciting structure for sustainability as a place for, like those regular check ins a couple of times a year to just keep you all on track. Continue to like, do lessons learned throughout the past since the time you checked in of where to, where there's more opportunity and things like that, and just keep everybody aligned. And of course, like bring storytelling into that meeting and play stories and just think like, okay, wow, this is what we built. Um, so yeah, I mean, there's just no reason to start from scratch. The future of storytelling in your organization already is alive and possible in what you're doing and probably asking for storytelling to be added in. It's just a matter of how you listen differently and view it differently as an opportunity. It's like that mindset switch of starting to see everywhere that you could sneak it in. And if anything that you heard today piqued your interest, or you're interested in having one of those story lab sessions, where I'll guide your team through exploring what stories you want to tell, who should be telling them, what's getting in the way, and also how to add it into your organization. I would love to be there to support you from turning storytelling from that abstract idea into that like living practice that's like built into the bones of your organization. And my assignment for you today is, add one storytelling question to your next check-in, or reach out to the annual reports team or the grant narratives team and just like ask about, where they think that storytelling could be added in. Because again, storytelling is not a nice to have, it is our strategy. And when we build our strategies off of story, we have buy-in from staff, we have buy-in from the communities we serve. We get much more efficient, we get much more effective, and we are not in a time where like we have time to waste or resources to waste. And so the most effective way to get where you want to go is through adding story in. And I hope this was just like a helpful way to like get you thinking about where like how easy it could be and how seamless it could be to add it in. And of course, if you want support, I'm here. But thank you for joining me today. Feel free to reach out at mbarney@entangledhealth.com. Would love to connect about the projects you're doing and what might be possible, and hear about how adding these initiatives goes, um, as you prioritize it throughout your organization. So have a wonderful day. Take good care, and I look forward to connecting soon.